as he's taking these off, welcome to another Kopke. And every year, Kevin, I try to, unbeknownst to you, find better ports than the ones that we celebrate here. And because this is our fifth year?
Fifth year, I think.
Fifth year. And I taste a lot of port during the year, and I tell them to bring them back, during the holidays, and I benchmark them against these Kopke ports, and Kopke comes out on top, except we do have one stranger to the group this year, and we'll get to that.
We'll get to that later.
So, Kopke has been around since
1638.
1638. That's all.
Oldest port house in the world. It was established by a German family from Hamburg, Christian Kopke, and after a few reiterations, they're still around.
Yeah, they're still around. They're still bottling in the same stenciled bottle and
hand painted. They do millions of bottles a year, and they haven't changed in a long, long time.
It's great stuff. So now, port being, originally wine could not make the trip on a boat. It would become stale and old, and so they started to fortify the wine, right?
They basically they use aguardiente, which is a neutral brandy. They rest fermentation at 7%. They add the neutral brandy to get it up to around 20%, and that's why it was able to make the long trip between Portugal and England during the French and English War, when the French wouldn't sell wine to the English.
And the English wine, if you ever had it, there's a reason why they wanted the French wine. And that's not an unusual story. I mean, IPA beers are basically the same story. Beer could not make the trip, and so they started to fortify it with or strengthen the alcohol content. So we're starting with the white port, which I have a bottle in my refrigerator at the house, and I use it often not only for just as an aperitif, nice and chilled. Sometimes you put a lemon twist or something in there, but I actually use it sometimes as a vermouth to a certain extent.
It's actually really great. I mean, it's very versatile. It's something that a lot of people don't know about, but I think it's got a lot of nice kind of minerality. Of course, it's got the residual sugar of port, but it's balanced with that acidity and minerality, and it actually goes great on the rocks with a little twist of tonic and some lime.
It's good stuff. So you don't see, and I sell a lot of white port, folks. You give it a try, and it's a half bottle. You don't have to invest too much to give it a whirl, and you only pour like an ounce typically for a serving of any kind of port, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
You agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, most of the pours, Paul, are extremely small. I mean, an ounce and a half is enough. I mean, 2 ounces to 3 if you're sipping on it for a while after dinner. If you're pairing it with strong cheeses, it goes great with Stilton, great with strong blue cheeses, and also with chocolates and truffles.
And since I didn't bring a spit bug, you're gonna have to drink that.
Oh, geez, okay.
See, this is an occupational hazard, folks, when we're tasting port, particularly at 22%
Delicious,
alcohol.
delicious. Though.
So now we're on the fine tawny port, and tawny port different from ruby port in what?
Okay, so the tawny ports, there's basically 2 kinds of port that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with tawny and ruby. We started with the dry white, which is a little bit different because you're using white grapes instead of the red grapes. With the tawny, you're dealing with a barrel-aged regimen instead of bottle-aged, which is the ruby ports. So we're going to go through these tawnies. At the end, we'll get to the rubies, which are aged in bottle, but these are all aged in barrel. And as you know, the name tawny, it refers to the color of the wine, which is an amber tawny color, as you can see in the glass here, Paul.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This is now 10 years means the average age is 10 years in the barrel.
Exactly. So 10 years is a blend of different ages. The winemakers got more influence on these than, say, a Collita, which is the single vintage tawny. The 10-year is a blend of different ages, which has got to equal at least 10 years of age.
Wow. Now, this one does very well for the years. You can see the depth in the nose changes from the extra age. And
Absolutely.
The color, too, right?
Yeah, the color, it gets a little bit lighter as the wood and the fruit kind of integrate in the acidity. You also, with the 10, because it's got to be at least 10, actually the Porto Kopke 10 is 15. They don't have a 15-year designation. You've got 10, 20, 30, 40, but it does have that extra 5 years of bottle age on it.
This is, if I was to pick like sort of a quintessential nose and just a character for general port, obviously going down in age or going up in age is going to change it, but I'd sort of pick this 10-year-old as just like a good example of what it should be like, what the balance should be like.
I think so too. I think it's the benchmark for Kopke. It's also the benchmark, I think, for a good 10-year tawny, just because it does have that balance, the acidity, and it's really got great length as well.
I'm gonna have to shorten these pours as we go through this video because they get getting a lot of wine. Okay.
Right, exactly.
So now 20 years. So it's the same logic.
Yeah, same logic with the 20. You're dealing again with a blend of different years, different Colheita vintages, single vintages, which equal at least 20 years old. With the 20 though, you notice a little bit more complexity in the wine. The fruit starts to integrate more. You get more of these citrus notes and baking spices, and they kind of rise to the top, and the acidity is a lot more noticeable on the palate.
I get the baking spices for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Definitely more complex than the 10, but the 10 not being at all sacrificing its quality level. But it's interesting nose difference for that 10 years. I mean, obviously, right?
The 10 is just a lot more viscous. The 20, you get more of the elegance in the wine.
Now, the year before I was born, 1957, Colheita.
All right, so 57, Colheita, really one of the rock star vintages of the Kopke lineup. Colheita, again, these are vintage tawny ports, so they've aged at least 8 years in barrel before they are bottled. If you look on the back of the actual label, you can find out exactly when it was bottled.
This is bottled in 2013.
Okay, perfect. So that's a very important date.
That's
that
amazing.
Means, yeah, Paul, it means the evolution of the wine occurred in barrel until it was bottled in 2013. Once that happens, then the evolution stops, and you end up with the wine in the bottle to drink for 10 or 15 years or what so until
that's 66 years in barrel.
Right.
So this is a declared vintage. Maybe to discuss that in Portugal, the consortium gets together and they decide which vintages they're going to allow to be bottled as a single vintage, and that's a declared vintage 1957. That's amazing. This has been sitting in barrel for that long.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, even the people who made this wine might not even be around.
Probably a really good chance of that too, right? Isn't that a great thought on a holiday thing? That's great. So all right. So now we're going to the rubies, and the rubies are
okay. So the rubies, again, as I mentioned earlier, ruby ports are aged in bottle, not in barrel.
And the color's totally different there.
Yeah, exactly. The color's ruby. Again, that's where you get the tawny and the ruby, and the white. It's not as complicated as you think, but the rubies, rich, dark. I mean, basically, you're taking a very intense, red grape, Touriga Nacional and other varietals, and creating a wine which has got a lot of rich complexity.
And you can see the difference because you feel the wood, you can feel the sort of the old, not to say old world, but there's a little more earthiness to these wines. You get the oak, but it's not overpowering. And this is, in its own right, just as complex, except it's just a more fruit-forward, a little brighter version of what port be. And I can see it having different cuisine, different nuts, different types of things to serve with.
Absolutely. I mean, you could really drink this with, it's basically a big red wine with some residual sugar. So, you could drink this with a rich, barbecued steak or something of that kind of depth, or some really like some gamey fowl. Whereas, when you're dealing with the tawnies, they're a little bit lighter on their feet. I like them, as after dinner drinks where you don't need to pair them with food just because they have the acidity to kind of like cleanse your palate.
So here we're going to use the Corvine, folks. If you haven't seen one of these, this is actually takes argon gas, puts it in the bottle, and sends the wine out, and that helps you save the wine for later. And this is a 2007. This is a different house now. We're not talking about Kopke anymore.
Kopke, the 7 was a big hit and sold out. I was able to find a little bit of library stock of the 07 Roca, which is a port house which has got a lot of similarities with Kopke, right down the street. And great vintage. The depth, the complexity of this one is about as good as it gets. 94 to 96 points from Roy Hirsch for the love of port. Whoa.
Hey, the Corvine is screwed up. Hey, you're messing up my counter.
Sorry about that. It's such an intense wine, Paul. We just can't keep it in the bottle.
Interesting, deep, dark fruit in this.
Right. So you get like these incredibly deep. Dark berry fruits. You get melted licorice. You get crushed rocks. You get a lot of minerality kind of underlying.
And we filtered the rocks out, right? So,
yeah, of course. Yeah, there's no rocks in these.
This is it's at 07. It's already 5 years old, but it's got tons of depth for long. This is gonna go for a long,
this could go for
time.
50 or 60 years, Paul. No problem. I mean, if you just see it, like how it stains the glass, this wine has got incredible viscosity, incredible depth and concentration.
Wow. Well, now that I've had about 6-7 ounces of port, ready to go to work, Well, this is work. Hey, what the hell? Pleasure, always a pleasure, Kevin, to
Thank
have
you,
you
Paul.
here. Folks,
Happy
get
holidays.
your Kopke ports for the holidays. And we always have them in stock, by the way, throughout the year as you finish them, because you will. Cheers.
Cheers.